I simulated the 2022 NBA playoffs in NBA Live Mobile. We're going to start off with game one over here, which was the Phoenix Suns versus the Pelicans. We got both teams over here set up and ready to go. It was a pretty slow first quarter. We had the Pelicans up by 2, but it was only 4-2. It wasn't amazing scoring wise in that first quarter, so a lot had to be done in that second quarter. And through the second quarter, the Pelicans stayed ahead for a little bit, and then the Suns came right back at it to end off the first half with the game being tied at 10 points apiece. In the third quarter, the Suns then tried to take on the lead, and they did a little bit as we ended off the third quarter with them being ahead by 5 points. And the Pelicans really did try to come back at the end. We had CJ McCollum knocking down a 3-pointer in the last second, and that was it though. It wasn't enough to beat the Phoenix Suns, and the Pelicans went home losing by 1 point to the Suns. It's tough to go out by 1 point over here, but that's what they did in the first round, and the Suns move on to round 2. Then in the second game, we had the Utah Jazz up against the Dallas Mavericks. We had Luka Doncic trying to lead his team to that second round, and it wasn't actually too good on the scoring front either in this game as well. We ended off the first quarter with a 4-2 lead for the Utah Jazz, but then things started to pick up just as they did in that first game. And what we had was the Jazz actually going ahead by 2 points at the end of the first half. In the third quarter, scoring picked up again a little bit, and we ended off the quarter all tied at 12 apiece. And then it was a real battle to try and see who would get out on top. Both of them going bucket for bucket as we went into that fourth quarter. The Mavs are up by 2 points. We got Rudy Gobert going up and finishing off an easy layup over there. 12 seconds left in the game. What have the Mavericks got up their sleeve? What's Luka Doncic going to do over here? He dribbles the ball. He's guarded by Conley. He goes in. He plays it out to Tim Hardaway Jr., plays it to Finney Smith for a fading 2. Can he knock this down to send the Mavericks into round 2? He splashes this one over here. So we're down to the last 1.8 seconds. Can the Jazz make a 3? Conley shoots, and he's going to miss that shot over there. So the Mavericks going through to round 2, beating the Jazz by 2 points in a really tough ending over there. Then we had the Warriors up against the Denver Nuggets, and the Warriors had a pretty decent team. Obviously, you got Curry, you got Clay, you got Draymond. All of those guys are elite players in the game over here. But again, the scoring wasn't amazing in that first quarter, and it was tied at 4 apiece. And then we head over into the second quarter, and again, both of the teams pretty much neck and neck. The Warriors just ahead by 4 points in a 12-8 lead. And then we went into the third quarter. The Warriors kept that lead as we got through, and it was 19-14 to end off that third quarter. The fourth quarter, again, pretty much the same, although the Denver Nuggets did try and make a comeback, and it was a 1 point lead for the Warriors as we head over into the last couple of seconds. Looney plays it over to Curry. Curry comes back out for 3. He's going to hold on to the ball. He goes in for a dunk, and that is going to be it. The Denver Nuggets are going home. It's a 3-point win for the Warriors over here. They're going to defeat the Denver Nuggets, and they're going to go through to round number 2. And then we had the Memphis Grizzlies against the Timberwolves. This one was a really close matchup. Both of the teams sticking at it together. It was 4-4 after that first quarter, and that just carried on throughout the whole game. We had at the end of the second quarter a 2-point lead for the Grizzlies, and then we just kept going into that third quarter, and it was more of the same really. It just kept going back and forth, and we had a 1-point lead for the Grizzlies, and it just kept going again back and forth. 5-point lead for the Memphis Grizzlies. They went ahead and won that game over there, and that was the whole of the West completed. We had the Dallas Mavericks going up against the Phoenix Suns, and the Memphis Grizzlies going up against Golden State Warriors in the second round over here. But let's go over to the east side where we had the Hawks going up against Miami Heat. This one was a bit better in that first quarter, and we had more scoring, and it was the Hawks leading by 5 at the end of the first quarter. But the second quarter, the Heat managed to make a little bit of a comeback, but they were still 2 points behind the Hawks. And then things got tied up in the third quarter, only for the Hawks to again make a bit of a push and get that lead back to 27-23 going into the last quarter, and it was just more of the same. The Hawks just sticking ahead to end off the game 36-27 over here. The Heat wasn't good enough to beat the Hawks, and they are going through to round 2. And then we had the 76ers versus the Raptors. This game was really interesting, and we ended off the first quarter with a bit better scoring, 8-6 lead by the Raptors. Not the 76ers, the Raptors were leading the game. And then we went into the second quarter, and things stayed the same. A 12-8 lead for the Raptors going into the second half, and they just kept ahead. The 76ers did try and make a little bit of a comeback, and it was all tied up at 14 points apiece at the end of the third quarter. And then in the last quarter, the Raptors were just kept making buckets and buckets, and the 76ers had nothing to answer back with, and we ended off the game with a 22-16 win for the Raptors over here. They're going on to round 2. They're knocking out the 76ers in a massive upset. And then for the next game, we had the Bulls versus the Bucks. Now, this one was pretty interesting as well. Again, it went pretty close through that first quarter, they were pretty much level until the Bulls made a really good three-point shot to put them ahead by 3 points going into that second quarter. And again, it was more of the same. Only 2 points were scored in that second quarter to mean the Bulls were up by 5 points now. The previous champions are looking a bit shaky, and they were on the ropes by the Bulls as they kept the lead going 15-12 going into the fourth quarter, and it was more of the same. The Bucks never really made a push to try and get back at the Bulls, and it ended off 21-16 win for the Chicago Bulls. So they move on to round 2. Then to end off the East, we had probably the two heavyweights. We had the Boston Celtics versus the Nets over here going up against each other. And a lot of people think that the playoff champion this year will probably come from this matchup over here. And it didn't really disappoint. We started off in that first quarter with it being 9-all until Jason Tatum comes through with a three-pointer at the buzzer to make it 12-9. And then it just remained quite close throughout the whole of the second quarter. We had the 3-point lead for the Boston Celtics for most of it until we had another late shot by the Brooklyn Nets. It was Andre Drummond getting the shot off so that it made the lead a 1-point lead for the Boston Celtics after the first half. And it just kept going back and forth between the two teams again and again and again all through that third quarter until we ended off with the Boston Celtics being 1 point ahead still of the Brooklyn Nets. So it all came down to this final quarter, and the Celtics and the Nets were 24 apiece for a long part of the match until the Boston Celtics managed to get 3 easy buckets to put themselves ahead, and they won the game 30-24 to end off the round 1 matchups for the East and the West. In the East now, we have the Boston Celtics up against the Chicago Bulls and the Raptors up against the Atlanta Hawks. And we start off in the West over here with the Mavericks going up against the Suns. Now this one was a really interesting matchup. It didn't start off with masses of scoring. It was only 4-2 to the Suns. They were still keeping ahead at the end of the first quarter, but then going on into the second quarter, the Mavericks start to make a comeback, and they do actually end up winning the second quarter, and they are winning and leading by 4 points. It's 12-8 now as we go into the third quarter. The Suns still behind, but they did make a little bit of a comeback only to lose it again towards the end of the third quarter, and we ended off the third quarter with the Mavericks ahead by 6 points. It was looking really shaky for the Suns in trying to make a comeback over here. They did come pretty close though, and it was really interesting. I thought this was all done, but it wasn't. Devin Booker plays it over to Jay Crowder, and it's a 2-point lead for the Dallas Mavericks. They've only got 12 seconds left on the clock. They can simply just hold on to the ball, but they don't. They play it to Kleber, who goes in for a layup and gets blocked by DeAndre Ayton, coming in clutch with a block over there. Crowder, though, he wastes his time way too much and just goes up too slowly, plays it over to Devin Booker for a really deep three, who just misses that one over there. So the Phoenix Suns are going to go out to the Dallas Mavericks in round 2. This is the end of the road for the Suns. Again, a little bit of an upset happening in this round 2. So the Mavericks are going through to the conference finals in the West. And then the other round 2 game for the West, we had the Golden State Warriors against the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Warriors just absolutely dominated. They were up by 6 in the first quarter, but they did let the lead slip so that the Grizzlies came back and made it a 1-point lead for the Warriors. Things were looking a little bit rough in the second quarter. The lead changed a little bit until the Warriors just went absolutely crazy with their scoring, and they were up by 6 points at the end of that second quarter. And then going on into the third quarter, it was more of the same stuff. The Warriors just stayed ahead and were keeping on winning until they got to the end of the third quarter, where they were up by 22-14. And again, the fourth quarter, the Memphis Grizzlies had nothing to come back to the Warriors, and the Warriors end up winning 30-16 at the end of that game. So they move on to the conference finals to face the Dallas Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals. And then we also had the Hawks going up against the Toronto Raptors, the surprise team going through to round 2. And it was even more surprising with this game. You had the Hawks leading 8-7 at the end of the first quarter, but then the Raptors started to make a little bit of a comeback over here and actually took the second quarter, so they were ahead by 6 points. They were up by 18-12, which was just absolutely nuts, and they stayed ahead throughout the third quarter, ending it off 26-20, and it was more of the same stuff in the fourth quarter. The Hawks tried to answer back, but they couldn't actually in the end, and the Raptors ended up winning 31-26, again making a massive upset and reaching the Eastern Conference Finals, which is just absolutely nuts. We had the Celtics up against the Bulls. They both had exactly the same team overall as we went through, and at the end of the first quarter, the Celtics were up by 6 points. They were winning 8-2, which was a pretty decent lead going into that second quarter. But then the Bulls started to make a little bit of a comeback, and they did at one point tie up the game, but the Celtics did manage to get a late shot from Derek White at the end of that game to put them up by 2 points against the Bulls. Again, it was more of the same stuff, just going back and forth again and again and again between the two, but it was a 2-point lead for the Celtics heading over into the last quarter of the game, where things got really, really interesting. We had Vucevic going in for a dunk and knocking down that dunk to tie up the game with 28 seconds left on the clock. To Williams in the paint, who gets blocked by Vucevic, but Tatum managed to get the shot off, but he misses it. Vucevic now with the rebound, plays it over to DeMar DeRozan. Can DeMar DeRozan come in clutch with a shot? He's got tons of space. He goes in for a mid-range shot with 4 seconds left on the clock, but he bricks that shot. He does not come in clutch, and White's going to pick up the rebound, plays it over to Smart, half-court heave, and he's going to miss it. So this is the first game that went to overtime. It was absolutely ridiculous. This game went to overtime. The Celtics versus the Bulls, who managed to make a pretty decent comeback going into the game, and now it was just down to overtime to see which team came out on top, and then the Celtics started to dominate and pull away. We had a 6-point lead going into the second quarter of overtime over here, and then the Bulls tried to make a little bit of an extra comeback as they did earlier on in the game, but it wasn't enough, and the Celtics went on to win the game 33-30, and the Celtics are going to go through to the conference finals. And then we went on to our conference finals. We had the Dallas Mavericks going up against the Golden State Warriors. It was an interesting matchup, but it wasn't really much of a matchup. The Warriors just kept shooting again and again and again. The only points they were letting up were inside the paint shots for the Dallas Mavericks, and they did make a couple of good inside the paint shots, but it wasn't enough. The first quarter, 12-8 from the Golden State Warriors, and then the second quarter, it was more of the same. The Warriors just pulling more further and further ahead until they were 10 points up at the end of the second quarter. Third quarter, again, same stuff sort of happened, and they were up by 8, and then the fourth quarter just ended off with the Warriors winning 34-24, a 10-point lead for the Warriors, and they reached the NBA Finals, which is just absolutely nuts, where they were going to face either the Raptors or the Celtics. The Raptors were absolutely crazy in making it this far, and they did put in a really, really good fight. You can see at the end of the first quarter, it was 6 apiece. They were holding the Celtics to a draw at the end of the first quarter, but then the Celtics started to pull away a little bit. They had a 4-point lead going into the third quarter, and that sort of remained the case as we kept going through that third quarter, and they kept on getting the buckets in and getting the points scored, and they were up by 8 points going into the fourth quarter. The Raptors were unable to make a comeback. It was a well thought out game, though. They did come closer to getting a draw, but they didn't actually end up doing that. It ended off with the Celtics winning 22-17, and they would face the Golden State Warriors in those NBA playoffs finals. But before we get into that final matchup, this video has taken me hours to put together, so I'd really appreciate it if you could hit that subscribe button. You can always unsubscribe if you don't like the content, but it would really help the channel out if you could hit that subscribe button. But let's get on into the finals over here. We had the Boston Celtics up against the Golden State Warriors. Again, this was a tough matchup, but the Warriors in the first quarter were really, really good. They were up by 9 to 5 points, and then in the second quarter, we had a load more buckets being scored by Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green. All of those guys making a lot of buckets. The Celtics did try and make a couple of good shots over here. You had Derek White going in for an easy 2-pointer over there to try and close the gap on the Warriors, but the Warriors just kept on shooting, with Draymond Green knocking a nice mid-range shot down, and then straight away, you had Marcus Smart answering back with a post shot to keep the lead only to 2, and it kept going back and forth, and we had the last couple of seconds of the second quarter, Curry for 2, and he's going to splash that one over there. So it was a 4-point lead at the end of the first half for the Golden State Warriors going up against that Celtics in the finals, and it kept getting tougher and tougher for the Celtics in that third quarter, 23-16. But then we had the final quarter. Could the Celtics make a really, really big comeback over here? So the Warriors are going to regain possession. They got 16 seconds left on the clock. The Celtics need a steal and some big baskets to end off the game. There's no timeouts really in this game. There's no substitutions either, but you had Thompson with the ball, just wasting a lot of time over here. Plays it over to Draymond Green. Tough shot, and he manages to sink that tough shot. But the Boston Celtics dreamed of winning a championship over. Kevon Looney with a steal, shoots the really deep 3, and he bricks that one. But the Golden State Warriors have won the NBA Finals 29-22. It's been a really, really interesting time. Honestly, this is the first time I've ever done this, and I think nobody's ever done this on NBA Live Mobile, probably because of the amount of time you have to actually spend in doing this and putting it all together. But it has been really fun, and as we keep going through the playoffs, I will update the pinned comment in how many of these matchups NBA Live Mobile actually guessed correctly. At the moment, it's 0 out of the 15 matchups we came across today, because no one's actually gone through to round 2. But as we keep going through the playoffs, we'll see how many and how accurate accurate this prediction is. Obviously, a lot of guys do this on 2K22. I thought, why not bring it to NBA Live Mobile? It has been quite fun putting this together, and hopefully you guys did enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making this video. So leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and comment down below, were you right with your prediction at the beginning of the video? Maybe you just skip to the end to find out who wins. Are you surprised? Are you not surprised? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.